Now we would like to open up for questions and comments. I have many questions, but I don't want to take from the limited time we have. The whole story we were working on with Dr. Mustafa when we were modifying the double taxation treaties, there was a certain article on exchange of information. We said that we should work on increasing the tax authority to keep the information confidential. So this can be also applied in banks through the treaty, but this was rejected. No, we are not violating any rules, whether bank rules or any other rules. This is a special law, and special law can restrict public law. And I think this was submitted to Mr. Hani Adri, and then Mr. Hani Adri refused as well. Anyways, we want to reduce the secrecy of the banks if this does not affect financial inclusion. So some bodies can view like administrative prosecution or tax authority, for example. And this should be done under certain requirements with certain characteristics. And this takes us to what Mr. Ashraf said. All the data is available, and I don't really care to distinguish between tax, a fee, or royalties. The tax authority is the body responsible for verifying is this royalties or service. So getting the information is the core. But of course you're 100% right. Everything should have, the trail should be a trace, and tax estimation is not really crucial here. Because if I know that someone buys a software, then I can send a letter to this person telling him you bought this at a certain time for Kaza. That's why you should pay a tax within 10 days. So this is fine. But I don't have a tax authority capable of doing this job. So before issuing new laws, you need to upgrade the tax authority here to enable this authority to deal with the incoming data and to be able to deal with the way Dr. Mustafa thinks. How can we interpret if this is a royalty, a spending, service, and so on. So in 2005, when we issued the tax law, it was a major paradigm shift, but many items were not applied because this law was ahead of the time. We don't have the mechanisms in place, so we shouldn't modify the tax systems. We should upgrade or develop the tax authority. In the last 2 years, we had around 13, I think, modifications or 14 amendments. As Dr. Abla said, informal economy cannot be ring-fenced, for example. You are inspecting 100% of the financiers or the donors, but you're leaving the informal sector to grow. Uber will pay tax on the actual revenues, and the 25% tax would be on registration and traffic issues. And this is the 25% normal taxes paid. This has to do with the registration paper. So as a tax authority, would you consider this small or medium business, or will you consider the actual revenue, since you can get this and you can ask them to provide a tax return or a tax declaration form at the end of March. So Google. Dr. Mustafa referred to the concept of the fixed place of business, but this is not the only criteria upon which people are taxed. There is another concept on the effective place of management. In order to be taxed in Egypt, so you should have a physical establishment. But if you have an effective place of management, so if the company is residing in England but the management is done in Egypt, then this would be considered as a physical establishment. Also substantial business, and this is the criteria Europe considers. So they will bring together Google and Facebook. You have substantial business in England, and this represents a certain percentage of your budget. In the tax Egyptian law, we take into consideration the first two criteria, having a physical place of business and an effective place of management, or the real administrative office. So we should not claim that registering a country in a certain place will entail the fact that this company will be taxed. So if an English company is registered in England, but everything is managed from Switzerland, then this company should pay taxes to Switzerland, and this is the effective place of management. Let me explain this, but I really want to finish my point first. We cannot compare ourselves to Europe unless they have substantial business, do the work or do their investments present a big percentage of their own business size. If yes, then according to the law, physical establishments are taxed, except with representative offices. Represented offices can be used for promotion or marketing, but cannot conclude agreements or sign contracts. But if they can get the authority to sign the contract, then this would be an effective place of management. Of course, the companies have tax planning teams. The tax is part of the cost, so they will not evade taxes, but of course they will try to reduce taxes. This is a cost. Tax is a cost. Of course, you don't want to increase your costs. You want to reduce your costs. The solution when it comes to taxing digital economy is a reverse calculation.
So when we go back to the stamp law, who is going to pay the stamp of the advertisements? The advertiser, not the one who gets the advertisement, because the advertiser, as I said, is going to put this in among the costs. So when we were asking them for the tax statement, before changing it, there was a question: how many advertisements have you performed? So I can know how many stamp tax had been calculated. So this is here the main issue. You are not getting just data for getting data. No, the data has to be processed. It has to be processed so we can get reach results. The reform that took place in 2005, it would not take place other than this way, unfortunately. Why? Because there was a need for a reform, but trying to cope with this reform. But what happened? We have worked, and after that all these things vanished after January. Unfortunately, this happened. So this is the opposite qualification, or the So we don't want the bank to work as a representative for the tax authority. We want the bank to give information to the tax authority, and the tax authority would know all types of expenses. If you part of the a big part of the informal economy comes from the one who pretends as a representative. So we get an ID, national ID, from a farmer, and we by his name we import large quantities of goods. So those imported goods had been entered to the country officially. So if I have information about the credit letters issued, for sure I can get all the names to know who is this person. If they couldn't find his name, what would they do in this case? If they couldn't find his name, they start to know who is this person, to do some investigations, and till they finish this, they kind of are wait for the goods to know where would it go. So you have, of course, some departments who are going or responsible for collecting the tax. For sure, the collection of tax will be better if all the society is committed to that. What is also, there's another point. What is successful in foreign countries and not successful in Egypt? Because they have civilized people. We are saying that everyone is offering their tax statement, and because the civilized communities, they are offering their tax statements, because this deducted tax had not proven any success, because it's a deducted tax, because the French people are willing to offer the tax statement, and they are willing for change, and we don't have this. We need a lot of work to do from the tax authority, so they can change this society to a civilized one. I'm sorry for making it lengthy. Thank you. There is a point that I'd like to add about the civilized community. The day before yesterday, there was the conference of the IMF with the Minister of Finance and the Governor of Central Bank of Egypt, and there were 3 countries who had a very good performance in development: India, South Korea, and Malaysia. The man from South Korea said, what are the landmarks that or the things that you had done? Well, he said that we have adjusted the taxation system, and he said before 1960, they started 1966. Before 1966, there were a lot of bribes. The tax officer were not collecting taxes; he was just putting them in his pockets. So they did many things. How did they fix their tax system? They started to issue a new slogan for the taxation authority, saying that the most important thing is the honor and honesty, and the people committed to that. The one who has no honor or honesty will not be promoted, will not get bonuses. So that's what. So there was a 60% increment in the collection of taxes. So here to improve the professional level, what does this mean? If the tax officer is more professional, for sure, he will not be corrupted, or he will not take bribes. So here we are talking about commitment. The Koreans and the Japanese, no, they do not want to be insulted at all. But here in Egypt, we say, you just give an oath, so this is a kind of a getaway, or a way to evade from any punishment. Just 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, I saw 3 models: India, UAE, Saudi Arabia lately. There is now an application that each person has to use, whether you are going to use it or not. But this application, this is strange one. In this application, you use the ID, your ID number or passport number, and there is tracking for everything, all your details, and it's accessible by all the state bodies, your properties, the deed, the registration, if you are going to traveling inbound or outbound, and of course because there is a surety system, because they have many workers, so they can track all the bank accounts. So let's say, or let's be away from the Indian model. Maybe it's like a little bit sophisticated, but the model of UAE and Saudi Arabia, I think it needs more more further studies from the parliament, and how did they give it the legislative cover. As for the internal affairs, there are investigators that should be there, and we were in the ACA from the internal affairs. Yes, before having the national ID. Yes, suppose that all your data should be related to the national ID. That we have been talking about this for 15 years now. The speaker is not using the microphone. One of the plans that we had to have the unified code or unified number. The speaker is not using the microphone. So if I know that this physician, through the licenses he owns a car with £3 million, and he says that the revenue is £10,000. So it is there's one important thing about digitalization, which is information sharing. So let's say that the revolution that took place, the real revolution, is that now all the world is considered as a platform. Anyone now is considered as a platform. What do you mean by platform? I can talk to you and you can talk to me. So to have a set of platforms addressing each other, I think this no, they do not address. They didn't start to address each other yet. No, this is the easiest thing ever. So it's not complicated at all. So do you know how much this man consumes? Like how much electricity does he consume, and what properties does he have, and the transactions? I don't mind how much does he have in his bank account, but I'd like to know all the transactions. Those transactions shows everything. So if the banks themselves, this is a big debate outside abroad. So the information inside the bank, is it owned to the bank or to the person? So if there is a law, say called PET2, that obliges the banks to give the information for anybody, and as long as there is a consent from the party. So I don't know exactly what is happening now. So according to what I have seen, and what is submitted to the Parliament, the House of Representatives, and the Ministry of Finance, he says that he's going to restore back the wealth statement, which means that you are going every year to submit a wealth statement every year. So here we are. This had been stopped for many years. And many people, they were just giving false wealth statements. No, they see the draft law number 91. Yes, they were tackling this issue, but it had been excluded. The speaker is not using the microphone. Here we are talking about digital economy. That's why I want to simplify what we are saying and just give a simple example. Here in Egypt, as a taxation authority, when I'd like to put any entity for accountability, for sure I have to scrutinize their sales and see whether those is under the standard of substantial business or not. So here I'm not the one who is experienced in this, but through my readings I know that in Europe they are facing the same problem. From which angle? That there is sometimes there is a dispute about the taxes between countries. So here for instance, the company in Ireland, do they prefer Ireland because they have tax 13%? So does this mean that they don't pay the tax in Ireland, or what? Or do they disclose all information about their income and revenue or not? And they pay this 13%, but they do. But so there is. Some places in the middle of Europe, they know that the revenues is X and they pay 13%. In other countries as UK, they say that the X part of this X came from UK and I want a part of the 13%, or he should pay an extra tax. So this was our topic today. In Egypt, what can I do according to the current regulations? And if the current regulations do not give me a solution, how can I change or modify those regulations? I think this was number 3 in our paper. For the international efforts, we'd like to differentiate between two things. Between two things, Google is a US company, and if we are going to say that residence-based taxation, the profits of Google as a company from all the companies of the world are subject to the American law of taxation. So the problem here that the USA should tax the activity-based creation, and according to the new standards, all the countries have the right to impose taxes. So the tax that will be imposed all over the world, EUSA has to comply to that and give them tax credit. So what did they do? So they did that, but they didn't register that. Okay, the solution will anyway come up, and they are suffering now. So here the proportionality system that you are talking about. Google, we know that the volume of their work is $1 billion. They have Egyptian data of X, Ireland of Y, and this country of Z. So they said, why we don't use the proportionality, which means to take the portions of each country according to their volume of work, or according to the net profit, but still they said that this is a net profit. So this means that I need to take the consideration between between taxes. That's why today they are looking for a solution. The grave point here for Ireland, what Mr. Ashraf said, that the standards of setting the residence and the place of effective management. Yes, this is effective till now. This was effective till we signed the agreement. They were saying if I'm tiebreaker and I'm a founder in Egypt or UK and the headquarter is here in Egypt, in this case the tiebreaker gives the right to Egypt to impose taxes. This was before signing the treaty. They found that those companies, it's very easy. I can just say the headquarter is anywhere. So the amendment of Article 4 in MLE says if the company is residing in two countries, they have a foundation in UK and the headquarter is in Egypt or vice versa. So this country cannot enjoy the standards of the agreement. So Egypt or UK cannot give this company any advantage to enjoy any of these standards unless the tax authorities in both countries have to meet together and to reach a conclusion that where the activity creation takes place. So the transfer of residence, which is happening now all over the world, but unfortunately they made it optional. So Netherlands, yes, had chosen this, and it's known that most of the Egyptian companies have transferred their residence to Netherlands. So I think tomorrow they are going to change their residency in a country who had not chosen this article.
Why? Because they want to work according to their own interests. So according to the law and Egypt's signature, we will not take into consideration the effective place of management. But they are searching today. There is a community dialogue for 2 years now, because being subject to tax will not be trouble some, because single taxation principle is well established. So if you make profit, then you would be subject to one tax, whether in the place where you live or in the original country or the foundation company. Then what is new about that? Non-double taxation is new. So in digital economy, a company is residing in USA, for example. So they go search for a country like Holland, where R&D is really developed. So they did everything in Holland, and they benefited a lot. And then they transferred their headquarters to a tax haven, for example. The application is running all over the world, and of course they choose and select. There is participation exemption mechanism which they can use, but we need to differentiate between the international company ability to not to pay. So maybe they have a subsidiary in Ireland. What do? They establish a company in Ireland, not only to invest in Ireland, but to change the nature of the revenue. So if you're making money in Ireland, then you are under the dividend rules. But if you're conducting the activities in your own country, will be income or profit. That's why countries establish companies in other places to change the nature of the revenue. In the multilateral agreement, if you are misusing the loopholes, then you will not enjoy the benefits of this agreement. So the most important thing here is to define the profits to be taxed, and people are really keen on this. And by the end of this year, I think that they will declare the final say, and the countries party to the multilateral treaties, which is open to adding certain or additional items. هشام العلايلي. I have two comments. First, e-payments is not part of the digital economy. If you want to classify things the right way, digital economy is a different story. E-payments is a method of payment in an electronic form, but digital economy can be defined as change of the business model. So people working on tax legislations should take into consideration different business model. So we need to understand that the business model itself dramatically changes. As for the digital economy definition, It's broader than e-payments, for example, because the definition covers everything done through the internet, whether platform devices, etc. The digital economy has certain advantages and, of course, disadvantages. And you know the case, France against Google and all that. But still, digital economy in Egypt will be very promising, because the parallel market will reduce, and this will expand the tax base. The tax base is still limited. Those are the people we target. But digital economy should expand the tax base, because it reduces the size of the parallel market due to traceability. So expanding the tax base is really important. My question here is, will the idea that we should expand the tax base, or should we increase tax collection from digital economy? I think the profit made from digital economy will yield more taxes without having to go through complications. They can work it out because they dominate everything. So they are really competing hard. So, in my own point of view, I should get the benefits of the digital economy. I can expand the tax base, I can expand the tax revenues. Instead of focusing on Uber or the way of taxing transactions, I think this is the right way to do things. Mr. Hisham expressed my idea. So, what is the title? Challenging on taxation collection, or on the taxation legislations? Because there was a law issued 2 days ago on taxing Uber, on regulating land transportation, take into consideration ICT. The motive of this law is to collect fees and taxes, and also propose some solution to the problem of Uber and Kareem. So we limited the scope of digital economy to Uber and Kareem. So this is actually makes things worse, and this issue will not solve. We have many participatory economies due to ICT, and new things will emerge. So we will issue many laws, a series of laws. So all these laws that are going to be issued, besides the transportation law, there are 40 articles. 20 articles goes to regulating transportation through ICT, through the Ministry of Investment, Ministry of Interiors, and fees and tax collections are referred to many times. And Uber will not stop working, but maybe people working for Uber will bear certain burdens, having to buy a badge, having to buy registration papers. So someone might work for 2 hours. I had a symposium in the BUE on the same thing. The working hours differ from one person to another. Someone might be working with two companies, so this creates another complication. Maybe a third application might be launched into the market. And how can we regulate the tax? What about the company server, even according to Article 9 and 10 in the law? You still have a judicial warrant to be able to see the data. So tax collection is still an issue. So how can we encourage these people to pay the tax very easily, like what the people do abroad, instead of having many conflicting laws? And at the very end of the day, tax officers will randomly estimate things and people won't pay. People will file cases or will evade the paying taxes. So the estimation should be reasonably identified. We should have this ideas as recommendations. I heard from someone that if the tax authority submits to the state how much money it collects, so if the authority can collect 100 but the state asks for 150, then this is a burden to the state. The speaker is not using the mic, so it's really hard for the interpreter to follow. So in the budget, there is a slot for the tax that should be collected. We used to have the concept of time chain. Then so you should ask the tax authority for the money it can collect. Then it says X, I can collect X, and then you write a higher number. Maybe you assigned a number based on the GDP, but this overwhelms the capacity. How can or how the state plans its own state budget? This is according to a percentage taken from the GDP, irregardless of the tax authority capacity to collect this number. Unluckily, for 5 years we have been adding certain percentages from the informal economy to the formal economy. That's why we have high percentages. We have 800 billion, and the expected GDP is 5.2 trillion from 4.4 trillion. So there is 800 trillion as a surplus in GDP. So what we wanted to do is to have 5% of the informal economy to be added, and we want to have better figures published. That's why we increase GDP. So when we say internal debt or internal deficit, things will look better. So 80% in 19 blah 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 was like this. So the baseline, of course, will go higher and the percentages will go down. So we have a real problem. That's why they increased the GDP, because they cannot cope. The tax revenues does not reflect the GDP, and this is the window shopping or the dress shopping. And the tax revenues are really different. What we used to have is negotiation. Now they want the taxes to be a certain percentage from the GDP. Even a year ago, when we had 603 point something, and then I asked, how can you be that accurate? And they said it's a matter of a percentage from GDP. As for verification, yes, we do verify, but is everything paid cash or not? Because the public budget depends on the cash inflows. if you don't have cash inflows, then you're really in big trouble, and you will go to have loans or
Treasury
bonds, treasury bonds, bills. So we have 770. So the tax officer said in the first place that they cannot collect more than 500, let's say. The speaker is not using a mic.
The speaker is not using a microphone. So that's what I'm saying, that gathering the information, collecting the information, through collecting the information we can know everything. So here it's not preparatory or secondary activity. So here it's the revenues of Google. They are. It's not just the revenues do not come only from selling the data. Even Uber, they are selling the data, the information. So the revenues here is not only the revenues to sell something, but they are selling information. Yes, when they were estimating in the beginning, the budget is prepared in February. So in February they have the actual revenue or the actual collections. So and they are saying that it's supposed to collect in 4 months X. So after that they add the collections according to the inflation rate, and if they have any new tax, so they are expecting that they will get X. So this was the logic estimation, logic assessment. So if we're talking about GDP, it's always the difference between the GDP and the percentage. That's what we call the tax gap. When there is a tax gap system, there are two reasons for that, because the taxation policy, because as long as there is some activities who are not subject to tax, for example the capital profits or the certain activities, this means that the taxation policy here made this tax gap, and also to expand the tax base. So if you'd like to increase the GDP in a reasonable way, so you have to do expand the tax base, even if they are going to reduce the tax rate. This is the first part. The second part that we should do, and it's relevant to two things, that the tax compliance, as long as the performance is not good, for sure this means that there is a tax evasion and there is tax avoidance. That's why we are talking about tax management, but there will not be improvement in the tax commitment unless there is a improvement not only in the tax management. Yes, I think the tax authority is the weakest party, where we are putting many responsibilities on their shoulders. You can say that tax authority cannot apply some of these laws, or tax officer is corrupt. No, this is not the reality. The reality, as I always describe, that those are just legislative emotions. And I asked, would you accept to pay tax according to the law? In terms of the capital, no, because according to the 7,200, the nominal rate is 22.5, yes, but if it's a flat rate, it will be more than 50%. If I'm educating, I do not deduct this from the tax base, or getting treatments without deducting this from tax base. I am really honored to be a tax officer for 40 years, and if we'd like to deal with this objectively to improve the tax performance, yes, we have to change many things. We are talking about IT. In 2014, 2015, the allocation and the budget for the IT and tax for tax authority was zero. So what are you talking about? After that, you'd like to reduce the deficit. How no they are not going to reach the required deficit because yes, what I have learned in the past that if uh, if there is expenditure, this will give you good better performance. So if I'm going to generate 1 million, I need to borrow. So here if I'm going to spend on IT, it is expected that it will give me benefit more. So I think we need another session to discuss this, another seminar to discuss this. So our interest here, or our our interest is with tax authority. We always talk about corruption, and I think the thing that threatens the tax authority is the misuse of power and the misuse of authority. So some people, they have immunity against corruption and the misuse of authority. And the last sentence, someone who is infatuated is not living in reality if he's looking for social justice away from reforming the tax system and reforming the taxation system. Thank you. For the sake of time, now we have an idea about this topic. I think it needs several seminars. Yes, when I talk about Google, Google eventually is in a place in the world, and they disclose their information, their revenue information, and in the stock markets. But when I'd like to talk about digital economy in Egypt, yes, I encourage startups. The startups, and you said that there are some youngsters who are starting their startups, not similarly to be like Uber and Kareem. How can I list them, and how can I make them taxable? So this system, or through this system, if we can improve the bigger system, which is the whole system of taxation, but of course credibility, the credibility of the taxpayer who is willing to pay, and because he knows that this is a national commitment, and he can feel the impact of this. I think this through 3 or 4 years ago, I was in Norway, and the people were so happy when they are paying their taxes. I think they were paying 64% taxes. 64%. Of course, I was yeah, I couldn't believe it. So why are you so happy? So because the education, they get the highest level of education, they get the highest health services, and all the services are available. So he's thinking, what would I do with the money? I'm not paying anything for education or health, and the rest is for food, and that's it, and simple needs. So for the Norwegian experience, I have attended a lecture. They were talking about that they are giving to each for each family $50 for the parents, and one of the families, they had 4 children, and they said that one of your sons had died on this date. So what I'd like to say, that even the death data, the data of the deceased people, yes, they are aware of everything happening. We'd like to thank Dr. Mustafa Abdel Qadir and engineer Ashraf Sabri, and we'd like to thank you all for attending our seminar. and special thanks to Dr. Ashraf Al-Arabi and Dr. Abla. Thank you so much for the interesting seminars. The speaker is not using the microphone. The informal economy, digital organization is bigger than the formal. This is the reality. The speaker is not using the microphone. So we'd like to conclude our interesting session, and we hope to see you in next seminars. Thank you.